Algebra 1, Lesson 119, the quadratic formula and use of the quadratic formula. Here we see the proof for the quadratic formula, and if you remember the last lesson when we did complete the square, all quadratic formula is they take a quadratic and they replace all the numbers with a, b, and c. They do the method of complete the square, and then eventually they get, well, why am I so out of focus today? Come on, what's going on here? Eventually they get this. This is the quadratic formula. By the time you get to Algebra 2, you should have this memorized. I usually don't make Algebra 1 memorize this, so main thing we need to do is learn how to use it. And then, if you've been keeping up with your homework, you should recognize this very, very quickly because they've been having you do a lot of simplify problems using the quadratic formula without telling you what it is. But this is the quadratic formula. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'm going to go ahead and write that on our paper, and then I'll show you guys how we use that. So we have negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Now, how does this work in regards to a problem? So let's say we have the following quadratic equation. Let's say we've got 3x squared plus 2x minus 7 equals 0. All right, so we've got that quadratic, and we want to solve it, but complete the square is long and difficult. What we can do is we can use the quadratic formula, right? And this will work on every quadratic ever, even ones that are factorable. So what we have to identify is what does a, b, and c equal? And it's very simple. A is just the coefficient of x squared. So that will always be a. So a is equal to positive 3. B is the coefficient of x, so positive 2. And then c is the whole number. And notice I'm including the signs. So c is equal to negative 7. So if you write your quadratic in descending order, it will always be a, b, and c. If your quadratic is not in descending order, i.e. if it's not x2, x1, x none, then you're going to have to rewrite it so that way you don't confuse these. Now, once I've got a, b, and c, it's just like our plug-in method problems or our substitution problems. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take these values and plug them into the quadratic equation, and then I'm going to substitute everything inside of parentheses. So be very disciplined about substituting inside parentheses. It saves you a lot of trouble. So instead of writing negative b, I'm going to write negative parentheses 2 plus or minus the square root of parentheses 2 squared minus 4 times parentheses 3 c parentheses negative 7 all over 2 times parentheses 3. So now that I've rewritten this, I can go ahead and start simplifying. So what I always like to start with is this section right here. This is called the discriminant, and it's also the most complex part of the equation. So you could start by simplifying these parentheses. I usually do those last because it's inconsequential. Because you can do them first or last. It's not going to change your answer. The main thing I want to get right is this radical. So let's go ahead and simplify this radical. 2 squared is going to be 4 minus 4 times 3 times negative 7. Well, let's see here. 3 times negative 7 gives me negative 21. So that's negative 21. Negative 21 times 4 is negative 84. So I've got 4 minus negative 84. The two negatives cancel, and that becomes plus positive 84. So 4 plus 84 is 88. So now what I have here is the square root of 88. So I've got plus or minus the square root of 88. I'll go ahead and simplify this 2. This becomes negative 2. And then I'll simplify this denominator. This becomes 6. Now what I want to do is simplify this as best as I can. So immediately I see the square root of 88 can be factored. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 88, that could be 2 and 44. That will be 2 and 22. And then that will be, let's see here, 2 and 11. Okay. From here I've only got one pair of 2's. So that's going to give me 2 times the square root of 2 times 11, or 22. So 22 is as low as I can get. So now what I have is negative 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 22 all over 6. Now, the last thing that I can do, I'm off paper. The last thing I can do to simplify this is if I look at my numerator, I see I have a greatest common factor of 2. Both of these terms have 2. So I'll rewrite this as 2 times negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 22 over 6. Now, what writing it like that lets me do is it lets me cancel the 2 and the 6. That becomes 1, that becomes 3, which means that my final answer is just negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 22 over 3. All right. Well, that's quadratic formula, and that's how you use it. If you guys have any questions, let me know online, and I will see you in class.